The sun was just starting to set behind the rocky hills when Lucy heard the first war cry. She dropped the bucket of water she was carrying and ran toward the small wooden house where her family lived. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. "Papa!" she screamed. But there was no answer. The sound of horses thundering across the dry ground was getting closer. Lucy had heard stories about what happened to settlers who got caught alone during raids, but she never thought it would happen to her family. Lucy was 19 years old and had spent her whole life on the frontier. Her father owned a small piece of land where they grew corn and raised a few chickens. It wasn't much, but it was home. Her mother had died 3 years ago from fever, leaving Lucy to take care of the house while her father worked the land. The war cries were getting louder now. Lucy could see dust clouds rising in the distance. She knew she had to hide, but where? Their house was small and there weren't many places to go. She thought about running to the root cellar, but it was too far away. Then she saw them, a group of Apache warriors on horseback, riding hard toward their little homestead. Lucy's legs felt like they were made of stone. She couldn't move. All she could do was watch as the riders got closer and closer. The first warrior to reach the house jumped down from his horse before it even stopped moving. He was tall and strong-looking, with long black hair tied back with a leather band. His skin was dark from the sun, and his eyes were sharp like a hawk's. Lucy had never seen an Apache warrior up close before, and she was surprised by how different he looked from what she had imagined. "Where is your father?" the warrior asked in broken English. His voice was deep but not angry like Lucy expected. She was so scared she couldn't answer. Her mouth felt dry as dust. Other warriors were searching through the house now, looking for things to take. They found her father's rifle and some food, but they didn't break everything like she thought they would. One of them said something, in Apache, to the tall warrior, and he nodded. Lucy finally found her voice. "He went to town to get supplies," she lied. The truth was her father was working in the back field, and she hoped he was hiding there safely. The tall warrior studied her face for a long moment. Lucy could tell he knew she wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't say anything about it. Instead, he walked around her in a circle like he was trying to decide something important. "You come with us," he said finally. Lucy felt like her world was falling apart. "Please, I don't want to leave. This is my home." The warrior looked at the small house and the dry land around it. "This land belonged to my people long before your people came here. Now we take you." Lucy started to cry, but she tried to keep quiet about it. She knew crying wouldn't help her now. The warrior seemed to notice anyway, and his expression became a little softer. "I am called Stone Wolf," he said. "You will not be harmed if you do as I say." 2 other warriors brought rope to tie Lucy's hands, but Stone Wolf held up his hand to stop them. He said something in Apache, and they put the rope away. Then he helped Lucy up onto his horse, climbing up behind her. "What about my father?" Lucy asked as they started to ride away. "He will know what happened," Stone Wolf replied. "Maybe he will be smarter than to build his house on Apache hunting grounds again." As they rode away from her home, Lucy looked back one last time. She could see smoke rising from the chimney where she had been cooking dinner just an hour ago. Everything looked so normal and peaceful. She wondered if she would ever see it again. The group of warriors rode hard for several hours as the sun disappeared completely. Lucy had never been on a horse for so long, and her whole body hurt. But Stone Wolf made sure she didn't fall off, keeping one arm around her to keep her steady. When they finally stopped to rest, they were deep in the desert among tall rock formations that looked like giant fingers pointing at the stars. Lucy had never been this far from home before. Everything looked strange and scary in the moonlight. The warriors made a small fire and shared some dried meat and water. Stone Wolf gave Lucy some food and water too, which surprised her. She had expected them to treat her badly, but so far they had been rough, but not cruel. "Why did you take me?" Lucy asked Stone Wolf when they were sitting by the fire. He was quiet, for a long time, staring into the flames. Finally, he said, "Your people take our land, kill our buffalo, make promises they don't keep. Sometimes we take your people. It's the way things are now." Lucy didn't know what to say to that. She had, Heard her father and other settlers talk about the Apache, but they never mentioned anything about broken promises or stolen land. They just said the Apache were dangerous and should be avoided. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "To our camp. There are others there who will decide what happens to you." The way Stonewolf said it made Lucy feel cold inside. She wondered what these other people would be like and what they would want to do with her. Would they hurt her? Would they kill her? She tried not to think about it, but the thoughts kept coming back. When they started riding again, Lucy noticed that Stonewolf was being careful to make sure she was comfortable on the horse. He would slow down when the ground was too rocky and made sure she had water when she was thirsty. It was confusing because he was her captor, but he was also taking care of her. As they rode through the night, Lucy thought about her father. She hoped he was safe and that he wouldn't try to come looking for her. She knew he would be worried sick, and she felt bad about that. But she also felt angry that he had built their home so far from town where they couldn't get help when they needed it. The desert was full of strange sounds at night. Coyotes howled in the distance, and Lucy could hear other animals moving around. In the darkness, she had always been a little afraid of the wilderness, but now she was completely at its mercy. Stonewolf seemed to know exactly where he was going, even in the dark. He guided his horse around rocks and through narrow passages between the hills like he had traveled this way hundreds of times before. Lucy realized that this was his home, just like her little farm had been hers. As the night wore on, Lucy started to feel drowsy despite her fear. The steady rhythm of the horse's movement and the warmth of Stonewolf's body behind her made her feel safer than she expected. She tried to stay awake, but eventually her eyes closed and she dozed off. When she woke up, the sun was rising and they were in completely different country. Instead of the dry, flat land around her home, they were now surrounded by tall mesas and deep canyons. The rocks were red and orange in the morning light, and Lucy had to admit it was beautiful, even though she was scared. "We're almost there," Stonewolf told her. Lucy could see smoke rising from several fires ahead of them. As they got closer, she could make out a camp with many people moving around. There were women cooking over fires, children playing games, and men working on weapons and tools. When the warriors rode into camp, everyone stopped what they were doing to look at Lucy. She felt their eyes on her and tried to sit up straighter on the horse. She didn't want to look weak or scared, even though she was both. An old woman with gray hair and kind eyes walked over to Stonewolf's horse. She said something in Apache, and Stonewolf answered. Then the old woman looked up at Lucy and smiled. "Welcome," the old woman said in English that was much better than Stonewolf's. "My name is Morning Star. You will stay with me." Stonewolf helped Lucy down from the horse. Her legs were shaky from the long ride, and she almost fell. Morning Star caught her arm and steadied her. "Come," Morning Star said. "You must be hungry and tired." As Lucy followed Morning Star toward one of the shelters, she looked around the camp. It was much more organized and peaceful than she had expected. The children looked healthy and happy, and the adults seemed to be going about their daily work just like people did in her own town. Maybe, Lucy thought, these people weren't the savage monsters she had been told about. Maybe there was more to this story than she understood. But she was still scared and homesick, and she wondered what was going to happen to her in this strange new world. Lucy woke up on her third morning in the Apache camp feeling confused about where she was. For a moment she forgot she wasn't in her own bed at home. Then she saw the animal hide walls around her and remembered everything that had happened. Morning. Star was already awake, stirring something that smelled good in a clay pot over the fire. The old woman had been kind to Lucy since she arrived, giving her food and a warm place to sleep. But Lucy still didn't understand why she was being kept here or what these people wanted from her. "Good morning, child," Morning Star said in her careful English. "Did you sleep well?" Lucy sat up and rubbed her eyes. "I had strange dreams," she said. "I dreamed I was back home with my father." Morning Star nodded like she understood. "It takes time to feel at home in a new place, but you are safe here." "Why am I here?" Lucy asked. It was a question she had been wanting to ask for days, but she had been too scared. What do you want? With me? Morningstar sat down beside Lucy and handed her a bowl of the warm food. It tasted like corn and meat mixed together, and Lucy was surprised by how good it was. You are here because of the old ways, Morningstar explained. When your people take our people, we sometimes take yours. It's not about anger or revenge. It's about balance. Lucy didn't understand what Morningstar meant by balance. But I never took any of your people. I never hurt anyone. No, you didn't. But your people did. Your soldiers and your settlers. They take our children and send them far away to schools where they forget how to be Apache. They take our land and build houses on it. So sometimes we take your people too. This was the first time anyone had explained to Lucy why she had been captured. Back home, people always said the Apache attacked for no reason, just because they were violent. But Morningstar made it sound like there were reasons Lucy had never heard about. What will happen to me? Lucy asked. That depends, Morningstar said. Sometimes we trade people back to their families. Sometimes people choose to stay with us. And sometimes, she didn't finish the sentence, but Lucy understood that sometimes things didn't end well. I want to go home, Lucy said quietly. Morningstar patted her hand. I know you do, child. But home might not be the same place when you return. You are learning things here that will change you. After they ate, Morningstar took Lucy around the camp to show her how things worked. Lucy learned that the Apache didn't just wander around the desert like she had thought. They had a whole system for living that was organized and smart. Women knew exactly which plants were good for food and medicine. They could make clothes and containers from animal skins that were better than anything Lucy could buy in town. The men knew how to hunt and track animals in ways that seemed almost magical. Your people think we are wild, Morningstar said as they watched some women weaving baskets. But we have been living here for hundreds of years. We know this land better than anyone. Lucy was starting to see that Morningstar was right. These people weren't wild or savage. They were just different from what she was used to. That afternoon, Stone Wolf came to talk to Morningstar. Lucy could tell they were talking about her because they kept looking in her direction. She wished she could understand Apache so she would know what they were saying. When their conversation was over, Stone Wolf walked over to Lucy. Come, he said. I want to show you something. Lucy looked at Morningstar, who nodded that it was okay. Then she followed Stone Wolf out of the camp and up a rocky hill. The climb was hard, and Lucy was breathing heavy by the time they reached the top. From up there, Lucy could see for miles in every direction. The desert stretched out like a huge ocean of red rocks and green plants. It was so big and empty that it made Lucy feel very small. This is our world, Stone Wolf said, pointing to the landscape below them. My grandfather's grandfather lived here. His grandfather's grandfather lived here too. This is not empty land like your people think. This is our home. Lucy looked out at the vast desert and tried to imagine generations of people living there. It was hard for her to picture because it looked so wild and dangerous. But there's nothing. Here, she said. No houses or farms or stores. Stone Wolf smiled for the first time since Lucy had met him. You only see nothing because you don't know how to look. Come here. He led her to a spot where some green plants were growing between the rocks. This plant makes good medicine for stomach pain. And this one, he pointed to another plant, makes tea that helps you sleep. Then he showed her scratches on a rock that looked random to Lucy. These marks tell other Apache that water can be found nearby. And these marks, he pointed to different scratches, warn about dangerous animals. Lucy realized that what looked like empty desert to her was actually full of information and resources that Stone Wolf could read like a book. How do you learn all this? She asked. The same way you learn to read words on paper. We learn to read the land. Our grandmothers and grandfathers teach us, just like yours taught you. For the first time since her capture, Lucy felt curious instead of just scared. She wanted to understand how these people lived in such a harsh place and made it look easy. When they walked back to camp, Stone Wolf stopped at a place where several men were sitting in a circle, talking seriously. One of them was much older, then the others with white hair and deep lines on his face. "That is Chief Running Bear," Stone Wolf told Lucy. "He is the one who will decide what happens to you." Lucy felt her stomach drop. She had been hoping that maybe Morningstar would decide, since the old woman had been so kind to her. But looking at Chief Running Bear's stern face, Lucy wasn't sure what to expect. That evening, Morningstar told Lucy that there would be a council meeting about her the next day. "The chief and the elders will talk about whether to trade you back to your people or keep you here longer," she explained. "What do you think they'll decide?" Lucy asked. Morningstar was quiet for a long time. "I think they want to see what kind of person you are first. Are you someone who can learn our ways and respect them? Or are you someone who will always see us as enemies?" Lucy thought about that as she tried to fall asleep that night. A few days ago she would have said these people were definitely her enemies. But now she wasn't so sure. Morningstar had been kinder to her than some of the women back home had ever been. And Stonewolf, even though he had captured her, had protected her and treated her with respect. Maybe the problem wasn't that the Apache were evil. Maybe the problem was that nobody on either side really understood the other side. Lucy lay awake looking up at the stars through the smoke hole in the top of the shelter. The stars looked the same here as they did from her home. But everything else was different. She wondered what her father was doing and whether he was looking for her. She also wondered what she would say if someone asked her what she had learned about the Apache. She would have to tell them that these people weren't monsters. They were just people trying to protect their way of life, the same way her father had been trying to protect theirs. The difference was that her people were winning and the Apache were losing. For the first time, Lucy started to understand why Stonewolf had looked so sad when he talked about his land being taken away. She tried to imagine how she would feel if strangers came and built houses on her father's farm and told her family they had to leave. The thought made her feel uncomfortable because she realized that maybe her people weren't always the good ones in this story. Maybe sometimes there weren't any good ones or bad ones. Maybe there were just people trying to survive and protect the ones they loved. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lucy wondered what the council would decide about her tomorrow. But more than that, she wondered what she would decide about them. 2 months had passed since Lucy first arrived at the Apache camp, and she could hardly believe how much her life had changed. The council had decided not to trade her back right away. Chief Running Bear said she needed to prove she could be trusted before they would consider letting her go. At first, Lucy had been angry about this decision, but now she wasn't sure how she felt about it. Part of her still missed home terribly and wanted to see her father again. But another part of her was fascinated by everything she was learning in this new world. Morningstar had become like a second mother to Lucy. The old woman was teaching her how to find food in the desert, how to make clothes from animal skins, and how to prepare medicines from plants. Lucy had always thought of herself as someone who knew how to take care of herself, but she realized she had only known how to survive in one kind of world. "Look at this plant," Morningstar said one morning as they walked through a canyon looking for useful things. She pointed to a spiky green plant that Lucy would have walked right past. "The juice inside can heal cuts and burns better than anything your people have." Lucy watched as Morningstar carefully cut open one of the thick leaves. Clear, sticky juice came out, and Morningstar rubbed it on a small cut on Lucy's hand where she had scraped herself on a rock. The cut stopped hurting, almost immediately. "How did you know that would work?" Lucy asked. "My grandmother showed me when I was younger than you are now. Her grandmother showed her. We pass knowledge down like precious gifts." Lucy was starting to understand that the Apache had a kind of school, but it wasn't like the school she had attended back home. Instead of learning from books, they learned from their elders and from the land itself. Every plant, every rock formation, every animal track had something to teach. Stonewolf had also been spending time with Lucy, though he was more serious than Morningstar. He was teaching her how to track animals and how to move quietly through the desert. Lucy had never thought she would need to know these things, but she found herself enjoying the challenge. "Your people make too much noise when they walk," Stonewolf told her one day, as they were following deer tracks. "You step heavy like you want every animal to know you're coming." Lucy tried to walk more quietly, but it was harder than it looked. Stone Wolf could move across the rocky ground without making any sound at all. It was like he was floating instead of walking. "Why is it so important to be quiet?" Lucy asked. "If you're loud, you scare away the animals you want to hunt. You also let your enemies know where you are. In this land, being quiet can mean the difference between eating and going hungry, between living and dying." Lucy was beginning to understand that everything the Apache did had a reason behind it. They weren't just wandering around the desert without purpose. They had developed ways of living that helped them survive in a place that would kill most people from her world within a few days. One evening, Lucy was sitting by the fire with some of the Apache women, trying to learn how to weave baskets. Her fingers felt clumsy compared to theirs, and her basket looked crooked and loose. "Don't worry," said a young woman named Bright Moon. "My first basket fell apart the moment I put water in it. My mother laughed so hard she couldn't breathe." The other women giggled at the memory, and Lucy found herself laughing too. It felt good to laugh with these women, even though a few months ago she would have been terrified of them. "Tell us about your home," Bright Moon said. "What was it like?" Lucy thought about her little house and the farm where she had grown up. "It was small," she said. "We had a wooden house with 2 rooms and a root cellar where we kept vegetables. My father grew corn and beans, and we had some chickens." The women listened with interest as Lucy described things like glass windows and iron stoves. These things were as strange to them as their ways had been to her. "Didn't you get lonely living so far from other people?" asked another woman. Lucy realized that she had been lonely, even before she was captured. Her nearest neighbors lived miles away, and she sometimes went weeks without seeing anyone except her father. Here in the Apache camp, she was surrounded by people all the time. Children played games around her feet, women chatted while they worked, and men told stories in the evenings. "I guess I was lonely sometimes," Lucy admitted. "But I didn't think about it much because that's just how things were. Here, no one is alone unless they choose to be," Bright Moon said. "We take care of each other. When someone needs help, everyone helps. When someone is sad, everyone tries to make them feel better." Lucy had noticed this about the Apache. When an old man got sick, the whole camp worked together to take care of him. When a woman's husband was away hunting, her neighbors made sure she had everything she needed. It was different from the way things worked back home, where everyone mostly took care of their own family. As the weeks passed, Lucy found herself thinking less and less about her old life. She still missed her father, but she was no longer counting the days until she could go home. Instead, she was focused on learning new skills and understanding the Apache way of looking at the world. One day, Stone Wolf took her to a high place where they could see for miles across the desert. "Do you see that mountain?" he asked, pointing to a distant peak. Lucy nodded. "That mountain is sacred to my people. We believe the spirits of our ancestors live there. When we die, our spirits go to join them." Lucy looked at the mountain and tried to imagine it full of spirits. Back home, people talked about heaven as a place far away from Earth. But the Apache seemed to believe that the spiritual world was all around them, in the mountains and rocks and desert itself. "Do you believe in God?" Lucy asked Stone Wolf. "We believe in the Great Spirit who created all things. We believe that everything in nature has a spirit. The rocks, the trees, the animals, even the wind. We try to live in harmony with all these spirits." This was very different from what Lucy had learned in church back home. Her preacher had taught that nature was something to be controlled and used by people. But the Apache seemed to think that people were just one part of nature, no more important than the animals or plants. "What do you think happens when we die?" Stone Wolf asked her. Lucy thought about the question. Back home, she would have given the answer she learned in Sunday school. But now she wasn't sure what she believed anymore. "I don't know," she said. Finally, "I used to think I knew, but now I'm not sure about anything." Stone Wolf nodded like he understood. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. When you stop being sure about everything, you start learning. That night, Lucy lay awake thinking about all the things she had learned in the past 2 months. She could now start a fire without matches, find water in the desert, and identify dozens of different plants. She could move quietly through the wilderness and read animal tracks like a book. But she had learned more than just survival skills. She had learned that there were other ways of living besides the one she grew up with. She had learned that people she had been taught to fear were actually kind and wise. She had learned that the world was much more complicated than she had ever imagined. Lucy also realized that she was changing in ways that went deeper than just learning new skills. The scared, helpless girl who had been captured 2 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger and more confident, someone who could take care of herself in ways she never thought possible. She wondered what her father would think of her now. Would he be proud of how much she had learned? Or would he be upset that she was starting to see the world differently than he had taught her? Lucy pulled her warm blanket closer around her shoulders and looked up at the stars. Tomorrow, Morning Star was going to teach her how to make arrows, and Stone Wolf was going to show her how to use a bow. A few months ago, the idea of learning to use weapons would have scared her. Now she was excited about it. She was becoming someone new, someone who belonged in this harsh but beautiful land. And for the first time since her capture, Lucy wasn't sure she wanted to go back to being the person she used to be. 6 months after Lucy's capture, a messenger arrived at the Apache camp with news that changed everything. The man was dusty and tired from traveling, and he spoke quickly with Chief Running Bear in hushed tones that made everyone in the camp stop what they were doing to listen. Lucy couldn't understand most of what was being said, but she caught a few English words mixed in with the Apache, words like soldiers and trade and white woman. Her heart started beating faster as she realized they were talking about her. Morning Star found Lucy sitting by the fire, trying to pretend she wasn't worried about what the messenger had said. The old woman sat down beside her with a serious expression on her face. "The soldiers at Fort Apache want to make a trade," Morning Star said. "They have 2 of our young men as prisoners, and they want to exchange them for you." Lucy felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. After all these months of not knowing what would happen to her, suddenly she was faced with the possibility of going home. But instead of feeling happy, she felt confused and scared. "When?" Lucy asked. "In 1 week. The trade will happen at Willow Creek, halfway between here and the fort." Lucy stared into the fire and tried to figure out how she felt about this news. 6 months ago, she would have been overjoyed at the chance to go home. But now the idea of leaving the Apache camp filled her with sadness she didn't expect. "What if I don't want to go?" Lucy asked quietly. Morning Star looked surprised. "You don't want to return to your people?" "I don't know," Lucy said honestly. "My people don't feel like my people anymore. And this place, it feels more like home now than anywhere else." That evening, the whole camp seemed to be buzzing with talk about the upcoming trade. Some people seemed happy that Lucy might be reunited with her father. Others looked sad at the thought of her leaving. Lucy noticed that Stone Wolf was avoiding her, and she wondered what he was thinking about all this. The next few days passed, in a blur of conflicted emotions. Lucy found herself paying attention to little details about camp life that she had started to take for granted. The way the smoke from the morning fires mixed with the mist in the canyon, the sound of children laughing as they played games, the comfortable feeling of sitting with the women in the evening as they worked on their crafts. 3 days before the trade was supposed to happen, Stone Wolf finally came to talk to Lucy. He found her sitting alone on a rock outcrop, looking out over the desert. "You seem troubled," he said as he sat down beside her. "I am troubled," Lucy admitted. "I should be happy about going home, but I'm not. Does that make me a bad person?" Stone Wolf was quiet for a long time before he answered. "When I was young, my grandmother told me a story about a bird that was raised by rabbits. The bird learned to live like a rabbit, to hop instead of fly, to hide in burrows instead of building nests. When other birds came and told the bird it belonged with them, the bird didn't know what to do. It looked like a bird, but it felt like a rabbit." Lucy understood what Stone Wolf was trying to say. "So what happened to the bird in the story?" "The bird had to choose whether to stay with the family that raised it or go with the creatures it looked like. There was no right answer, only the answer that felt true to the bird's heart." Lucy looked at Stone Wolf's profile as he stared out at the desert. His face looked sad, and Lucy wondered if he would miss her if she left. "What do you think I should do?" she asked. I think you should do what will make you happy, Stonewolf said. But I also think you should know that if you stay with us, your life will be hard in ways it has never been before. Your own people will see you as a traitor. My people will always wonder if they can fully trust you. You will belong completely to neither world. The weight of his words settled on Lucy like a heavy blanket. She had been so focused on how she felt about the Apache camp that she hadn't really thought about what it would mean to choose this life permanently. And if I go back? She asked. If you go back, you will always be different from the person you were before. You will know things about my people that others don't know. You will understand that the world is bigger and more complicated than most of your people believe. That knowledge will set you apart. Lucy realized that Stonewolf was right. No matter what she chose, she would never be the same innocent farm girl who had been captured 6 months ago. That person was gone forever. That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her father and wondering how he had been coping without her. She imagined him eating alone in their little kitchen, working the fields by himself, going to bed in an empty house. The thought of his loneliness made her feel guilty for being happy in the Apache camp. But she also thought about what it would be like to go back to that small, quiet life after experiencing the richness of Apache culture. Would she be content to spend her days cooking and cleaning and waiting for something interesting to happen? Would she be able to pretend she didn't know that the Apache were complex, intelligent people rather than the savages she had been taught they were? The next morning, Morningstar found Lucy packing up her few belongings. You've decided to go, the old woman said. It wasn't a question. I think I have to, Lucy said, though she didn't sound convinced. My father must be so worried about me, and this isn't really my world, no matter how much I've learned to love it. Morningstar nodded slowly. You are probably right, but I want you to know that you will always have a place here if you change your mind. Even if I'm white? Lucy asked. Color of skin doesn't matter as much as color of heart, Morningstar said, and your heart has good colors. On Lucy's last day in the camp, people kept coming to say goodbye to her. Some of the women gave her small gifts, a bracelet made of colorful beads, a pouch for carrying herbs, a small knife with a carved handle. The children hugged her legs and asked if she would come back to visit them. Stonewolf didn't come to see her until the sun was setting. Lucy was sitting by herself, trying to memorize the way the light looked on the red rocks so she could remember it later. I have something for you, he said, holding out a necklace made of turquoise stones. Lucy took the necklace and felt how smooth the stones were. It's beautiful, she said. My grandmother made it for my mother when she got married. My mother gave it to me when she died and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to marry. Lucy looked up at Stonewolf with surprise. In all the months she had known him, he had never said anything about marriage or love. Stonewolf, she started to say, but he held up his hand. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said. I know you have decided to go back to your people. I'm giving you this so you'll remember that someone here loved you enough to want you to stay. Lucy felt tears starting in her eyes. I love you too, she said. That's what makes this so hard. Stonewolf reached out and touched her cheek gently. Love doesn't always mean staying together. Sometimes love means letting someone go where they need to go. That night, Lucy lay awake for the last time in the shelter she had shared with Morningstar. Tomorrow she would ride to Willow Creek and be handed over to the soldiers. In a few days, she would be back in her father's house, sleeping in her own bed, eating at her own table. She should have been excited, but instead she felt like she was losing something precious. She was choosing safety and familiarity over adventure and love. She was choosing the life she was expected to live over the life she had discovered she wanted, but it was too late to change her mind now. Or was it? Lucy stared up at the stars and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The morning of the trade dawned clear and bright, but Lucy felt like there was a storm inside her chest. She had barely slept, and every time she thought about riding away from the Apache camp forever, she felt sick to her stomach. Morningstar helped her get ready, braiding her hair the Apache way one last time and making sure she had food and water for the journey. The old woman's eyes looked sad, but she kept her voice cheerful as she fussed over Lucy like a mother preparing her child for a long trip. Remember everything I taught you about the plants, Morningstar said as she tucked a small pouch of herbs into Lucy's bag. You never know when you might need that knowledge. Stone Wolf brought his horse around, and Lucy climbed up behind him for what she thought would be the last time. As they rode out of camp, Lucy looked back at the people who had become her family. Many of them were waving goodbye, and some of the children were crying. The ride to Willow Creek took most of the morning. Stone Wolf didn't talk much, and Lucy could tell he was as unhappy about this as she was. She kept her arms around his waist and tried to memorize the feeling of being close to him, knowing that in a few hours they would never see each other again. When they finally reached Willow Creek, Lucy could see the soldiers waiting on the other side of the water. There were about a dozen of them, all wearing blue uniforms and carrying rifles. They looked nervous and kept their hands near their weapons. Between the soldiers and the Apache warriors, Lucy could see two young Apache men with their hands tied. They looked thin and tired, like they hadn't been treated well during their capture. Chief Running Bear rode forward to meet with the soldier who seemed to be in charge. They talked for several minutes, gesturing toward Lucy and toward the two Apache prisoners. Lucy couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could tell it was a serious negotiation. Finally, Chief Running Bear rode back to where Lucy and Stone Wolf were waiting. They want to see that you are unharmed before they release our men, the chief said to Lucy. You must walk to the middle of the creek and show them that we have not hurt you. Lucy nodded and slid down from Stone Wolf's horse. Her legs felt shaky, and she wasn't sure if it was from fear or from sadness. This was really happening. In a few minutes, she would be back with her own people, and her time with the Apache would be over. She started walking toward the creek, but something made her stop after just a few steps. She turned around and looked at Stone Wolf sitting tall on his horse. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of love and loss that made her heart break. I can't do this, Lucy said suddenly. Everyone looked at her with surprise. Stone Wolf's horse took a nervous step sideways, as if even the animal could sense the tension in the air. What did you say? Chief Running Bear asked. I can't do this, Lucy repeated louder this time. I can't go back to my old life and pretend that none of this happened. I can't pretend that I don't love these people, or that I don't belong here. Stone Wolf jumped down from his horse and walked over to Lucy. Are you sure? He asked quietly. Once you make this choice, there will be no going back. Your people will consider you lost forever. Lucy looked across the creek at the soldiers waiting for her. She thought about her father and how heartbroken he would be when she didn't come home. But she also thought about how heartbroken she would be if she left Stone Wolf and Morningstar and all the others who had become her real family. I'm sure, she said. This is where I belong now. Stone Wolf smiled for the first time in days. He took Lucy's hand and led her back toward the Apache side of the creek. The soldiers across the water started shouting when they realized what was happening. The officer in charge yelled that they had made a deal and demanded that Lucy be turned over immediately. Chief Running Bear rode to the edge of the creek and called back to the soldiers. The woman has chosen to stay with us. We cannot force her to leave against her will. She's obviously been brainwashed, the officer shouted. You've done something to her mind. Lucy walked to the water's edge so the soldiers could see and hear her clearly. Nobody has done anything to my mind, she called out. I'm making this choice because this is where I want to be. These people have treated me with more kindness than I ever received back home. The soldiers looked confused and angry. They had come expecting a simple exchange, and now they didn't know what to do. After a long argument, the Apache and the soldiers agreed on a compromise. The two Apache prisoners would be released as planned, but in exchange, the Apache would take something valuable from the soldiers' supplies. It wasn't the deal anyone had expected, but it was the only way to resolve the situation without a fight. As they rode back toward camp, Lucy felt like a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had made her choice, and even though it was scary, it felt right in a way that going home never would have. Are you happy? Stone Wolf asked her as they traveled through the familiar desert landscape. Yes, Lucy said without hesitation. For the first time in my whole life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When they reached the camp, Word of what had happened spread quickly. Some people seemed surprised by Lucy's decision, but most welcomed her back with joy. Morningstar hugged her so tightly that Lucy could barely breathe. "I knew you would come back," the old woman said. "I could see in your eyes that your heart was already here." That evening, there was a celebration in honor of Lucy's decision to stay and the return of the two young men who had been prisoners. People sang songs and told stories late into the night. Lucy sat beside Stonewolf wearing the turquoise necklace he had given her and felt completely content for the first time she could remember. A few days later, Stonewolf asked Lucy to marry him in the Apache way. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with the whole camp participating. Morningstar gave Lucy a dress made of soft deer hide decorated with beads and feathers. Chief Running Bear performed the ceremony himself, speaking about how love could bridge any gap between different peoples. Lucy's new life wasn't always easy. Some Apache remained suspicious of her, wondering if she could really be trusted, and sometimes news came from the outside world that reminded her of the ongoing conflicts between her birth people and her chosen people, but Lucy found ways to make herself useful that no one else could. Because she understood both cultures, she became valuable as a translator and negotiator. When misunderstandings arose between Apache bands and settlers or soldiers, Lucy could often help both sides understand each other's point of view. Years passed and Lucy became known among both Apache and white communities as someone who could be trusted to tell the truth about what was really happening in the conflicts between the two peoples. She helped arrange several peaceful trades and negotiations that might have turned violent without her involvement. Lucy and Stonewolf had 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son. She taught them to speak both English and Apache, and to understand both ways of looking at the world. She wanted them to be bridges between cultures, just as she had learned to be. Sometimes, late at night when her children were asleep, Lucy would think about her father and wonder what had become of him. She never saw him again, but she heard through various sources that he had eventually sold the farm and moved to town. She hoped he had found happiness and peace, and that maybe someday he would understand why she had made the choice she did. Lucy never regretted her decision to stay with the Apache. She had found love, purpose, and a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She had learned that home wasn't just a place where you were born, it was a place where you were accepted for who you truly were. In her later years, Lucy became known as a wise woman who could heal both bodies and broken relationships between people. Children from both Apache and white communities would come to hear her stories about the time when 2 very different worlds came together and found a way to understand each other. And when Lucy was very old and near the end of her life, she would sit with her grandchildren and tell them about the day she chose love over fear and adventure over safety. She would tell them about the importance of keeping an open mind and an open heart, even when the world seemed divided into enemies. Remember, she would say to them, people are just people, no matter what they look like or how they live. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to choose the life that makes you happy, even if it's not the life other people expect you to live.